Good morning, everybody. Welcome to this Friday's webinar from Anecdotal. I've just been complaining that the weather's rubbish in Leicester this morning and everybody else has got very nice weather. So hopefully you're having a great morning as well. I'm very pleased to have my partner in crime, Katie, head of marketing. She joins me most Fridays. And she organises a lot of the things that go on in the background. And we have a guest speaker, Kenda. Kenda, hi, good morning. How are you?
Good morning. I'm great, thank you.
I'll ask you a little bit more about yourself in a minute. We'll just do the sort of admin-y stuff first, and then you can come in and you can tell us all about yourself. So the format this morning then. So first of all, this is one of the last recordings from Leicester Digital Live, which you won't believe was actually over 2 months ago now. And Kenda's has talked with us, presented before when we did our online presentation, and is always one of the most popular talks. She did warn me, she did ask me to warn you that she does swear a little bit, but nowhere near as bad as Greg. So there shouldn't be any problems with that today. So the format is that we're going to have the poll first of all, just while we get a few more people to join us. We have got the handouts top right, which I've just been told I need to share. So I'll do that for you now. So Carol, if you can just let me know whether you can get, or anybody let me know whether you can find the handouts. And then once we had a bit of a chat, we'll run the video, which is 30 minutes, which was from the actual recording of the conference. And then we'll have some questions at the end. So I think over to you with the poll first of all, Katie, if that's all right.
Okay, so we've just launched it now. Do you understand what cognitive bias is, and are you aware of the impact it has on your marketing? So A, yes, I am aware and think about this all the time. B, yes, but it's a difficult subject. C, sometimes, but I don't think about this as a regular thing. D, no, I'm not thinking about cognitive bias enough and wish to learn more today. And E, not right now, and I think I need to learn more. So currently, it's all happening. I think 33% people are saying, yes, I am aware and think about this all the time. That's higher than I probably thought it might be. 33% are saying sometimes, but don't consider it as a regular thing, and then another third of the people are saying, no, I am thinking about cognitive bias. No, I'm not, sorry. So, yeah.
That's higher than I expected. Yeah.
Yeah, me too, actually.
Good. This is good.
You should kind of read the audience a bit more and know where everyone's coming from. Yeah, there's a bit of fluctuation now. People are saying it's a really difficult subject, 14%. And some people are admitting, saying, I just don't know anything about this, not right now at all. And that's 7%. So, yeah, it's been a bit of movement, but it's still A, C, and D.
Brilliant. Excellent. Okay, well, look, let's start our chat. So, Kenda, I mean, we met each other at a conference, and I was just explaining to the team that, and I think most people know that my first career was in biology, medical research, etc. And I was always moaning that I didn't do psychology as a subject. And I first came across this when I was reading about decision making, and I can never pronounce the two guys. But I think you were talking on this subject maybe in Orbit in a conference, and I met you, and I thought, I need to get to know this young lady. So tell us a little bit more about yourself and how you got into the subject, and a little bit about what you do, because I think your backstory is fascinating.
Well, I originally came to the UK, so I'm South African. I originally came to the UK because I was offered a job placement by the British Police Force, and I was studying forensic psychology. And through a whole bunch of weird things that happened, mostly because the UK isn't appreciative of non-British people, I ended up not working in the police force at that time and had to put myself through uni for a little bit. And happy coincidence of time, I ended up, I was studying forensic psychology at the time and then working in a marketing agency. And it was just really interesting seeing how most marketing just absolutely did not cater for the brain at all. And when that job fell through, I thought, you know what, maybe I should start my own agency. And I did. And so I took everything that I'd learned at uni from a forensics perspective, a psychology perspective, and started applying it to marketing sort of quietly in the background. And when we started getting really good results, people kept asking me, why are you doing things so strangely? Like, why do you do things this way? Why are you pushing this thing? And it took me a long time to feel confident enough to tell people about the fact I was using psychology. And then I ended up writing the book. And here we are today, talking about how this impacts people's marketing.
So you're not very good at marketing yourself because you've not mentioned the name of your agency and you've not mentioned the name of your book. So, you know, there's a little bit of, self-promotion needed here. But so tell us a little bit more about what your agency does, and then we'll come back to your book next.
So I run a behavioral marketing automation agency called Automation Ninjas. And if you want real self-promotion, we're a multi-award-winning agency. So effectively, we consult on the marketing automation process, help people understand the customer journey that you need to build out in your marketing automation and how consumer decisions impact that process, and then how to apply psychology to that process and how to make sure that the content is amazing. So that's predominantly what we do. Yeah.
And there's 6 of you, did you say earlier? There's 6 of you now?
Yeah, there's 6 of us in the team.
You've grown quite quickly, haven't you? And you've got a really good newsletter, which is definitely worth. Maybe you could stick a link in a minute in the chat so people can sign up to your newsletter, because it is quite it's quite educational, but it's quite entertaining as well. So I think it's it sometimes some of them I'm guessing this is deliberately. Sometimes it's quite you get some really catchy or clickbait almost side titles to draw people in, and it definitely works with me. So I think that's really really interesting. And I'm sure that's what you wanted to achieve. So tell me a little bit about the book and what the book talks about, and then you can tell us a little bit about what you're going to talk about in your video.
Sure. So the book is called Hack the Biobrain. It's an international bestseller now, which is very exciting to be able to say. And it's all about how we evolve to survive, not to buy stuff online, and the sort of implications that has on your marketing. So we definitely are not very good at making a lot of decisions, and therefore we should be structuring our marketing automation in a specific way. So the book kind of handles the theory behind why we should be structuring marketing automation and our customer journeys in a certain way, but it also then brings in real life case studies to kind of show you how businesses are utilizing it, as well as the science and the psychology behind it. So everything's validated with data throughout it. And you can tell that I'm an academic in the way that everything's cited all the way through the book, but it is written in a really, really easy to understand way. So,
you got is that the link that you've put into the book in there?
Yes, that's it.
Brilliant. Now you mentioned 2 words there that I understand. I'm sure Katie does as well, but maybe the audience doesn't. And you mentioned marketing automation and user journeys. So I've been speaking about marketing automation for about 7 years now, and I am just shocked how few people just understand what that concept is. And obviously there is marketing automation software out there like HubSpot, Marketo, SharpSpring, Infusionsoft, and lots of others, Pardot. So explain to me, when you're talking about cognitive biases in marketing automation, I'm guessing that you are going to cover things like, just ads and things, but you sort of string it together. And I think that's what you do that's unique. So tell me about it in its isolated form, like, seeing a single ad or a single web page versus the stuff that you do.
So the way we like to define marketing automation is everything that you do to get and keep a customer, right? That is, the Americans call this demand generation. It's not a term that's very common in the UK, but it's all those little things that you do to get and keep a customer, and it's how you leverage that process. So it might be utilizing something like a marketing automation platform. So something even as simple as MailChimp to be sending out a newsletter, that is marketing automation. It's a part of it. It could be utilizing some of Google's functionality to optimize your ads. That is also marketing automation. It is the things that help you leverage everything that you do to get and keep a customer. So that's how we like to approach it. And the way that we look at it is we don't look at it from the systems point of view. I think that's the mistake that a lot of consultants make. It's the mistake a lot of businesses make, is we look at it from a really siloed perspective because we're deep in the process all the time. So we look at it instead is what we try and get people to do is take a step back and look at it from the customer's perspective. So look at the journey the customer has to go through from trying to figure out what their problem is through to realizing you're the solution and buying your products and services and then becoming a repeat and loyal customer. How do you get them to go through that entire process? And what are all the steps that they have to go through? And we help people plan out that journey and realize where impacts get made and effectively plotting all of that out and then picking out the bits where marketing automation is really going to leverage and help the process. So we come at it from a slightly different perspective, and it removes the barriers that people tend to have and the mistakes that people make when they come at it from a systems first approach.
Excellent. I mean, I definitely think, we've been pushing marketing automation for a number of years now, but we don't really do the implementation. We sort of help train people, but I think that's probably the missing link. So it might be that I can refer you to some customers. Now, there's been a little bit of problem in the chat with your link, but I think Annetta solved it. So I think Annetta's found, and we found the link that works. So that's good. Okay. Let me just start the video. Anything, Katie, did you want to ask Kenda anything before we get going?
Maybe after. I'm gonna.
All right. Well, what we'll do is we'll turn our mics off because otherwise we're going to get a bit of a feedback loop, and we'll all disappear.
And I think you've gone on.
We're going to chat a little bit about some of the neuroscience behind cognitive bias, and in particular about how cognitive bias affects decision making, and therefore. We're going to chat a little bit about some of the neuroscience behind cognitive bias, and in particular about how cognitive bias affects decision making and therefore your conversion rates, because it has a serious impact on how people make decisions and therefore whether or not they choose to buy with your brand. So we're going to get a little bit non-technical because we're going to talk about neuroscience without talking about the neuroscience, right? Because that's how I like to partay. So in case you needed a second picture of my face, that's me. I'm Kenda Macdonald. I am the CEO and founder of Automation Ninjas, and we're an agency that specializes in behavioral marketing automation. And all that really means is that I use my background in forensic psychology to help people understand a little bit about how the brain works and how you can apply that to the decision-making process and the impact that has on your marketing as a result. I also wrote the bestseller Hack the Biobrain, which is all about how we evolve to survive, not to buy stuff online, and the implications that has for your marketing. I'm also a professor, yes, which is very exciting to be able to say, and I lecture at several universities about behavioral marketing. But what I spend most of my day doing is actually building pretty color-coded flowcharts and helping people sort of structure out the journeys that they're going to take people through and understand the impact points that behavior is going to have at the various different points in their marketing journeys. And one of the things that we really noticed when people map out their marketing automation and map out the decision points is how people forget that the entire thing that we're working towards in marketing is the purchase decision. That is it. That is the one thing we want to positively impact, is whether or not someone buys. And all the other little decisions that we're impacting around that are to positively make that impact. And yet we silo ourselves out in marketing and we forget, like SEO gets really obsessed with making sure that things rank. And email marketing gets really obsessed with making sure that that header looks really, really great. And we silo ourselves out and we forget that we're all working towards a decision point. And the challenge with that is the decision point is the most conflicted point in your entire marketing process. It is the point at which the most things will go wrong in the brain. And that is because it's hugely cognitively demanding to make a decision. And the brain is a survival machine, and it does not want to expend calories at any point in the process, right? You expend calories, you decrease your chances of getting your genetics to the next day, and you might die. And, the brain doesn't want that. So it's going to do anything it can to make sure that you're limiting the amount of calories that you are spending. So bias happens as a result because the brain takes shortcuts. It tries to make sure that it's not expending calories and effectively just make sure that it's calming everything down and using as little processing capacity as possible. But we demand a lot from the brain in modern life. We're not just deciding whether or not to eat those scary-looking berries. We're deciding whether or not to buy an amazing pair of Doc Martens, which is my current obsession. So bias is going to happen throughout this process because the brain is trying to limit the amount of processing power that it's utilizing. When it limits the amount of processing power it utilizes, it makes mistakes. And so there's a fantastic bit of research that was done many, many years ago. We utilized dual process theory to take in information and understand what to do with that information. And Daniel Kahneman and Amos Tversky made this very famous. They are Nobel Prize winning psychologists. They won the Nobel Prize in economics despite being psychologists, because they showed how this theory makes us make illogical decisions. So before they really brought dual process theory and cognitive bias into the limelight, economics just decided that we were all super logical, and we would make the best choices about everything if we had all the information available. And they went, that is totally not how things work. So they said, we got two systems that we use to understand the world around us. We have system 1 and we have system 2, right? Very inventive, the way they labeled the systems. So they said system 1 was super fast and system 2 is much slower. Hence the title of their book, Thinking Fast and Slow, right? These guys are super inventive. It's a good thing that we're super clever. So they said that system 1 was so fast it could basically be considered automatic, and system 2 was much slower, so it was like a manual process. And they like to refer to system 1 as the autopilot and system 2 as the pilot, which also gives you a little bit of a hint as to what the importance level of these two systems is. Now, the real difference between the two systems is the fact that system 1 takes in 11 million bits of information per second. That is a shit ton of information for any system to be taking in. System 2, on the other hand, takes in 40 bits of information per second. Now, if you relied on system 2 to get out of the house this morning, it wouldn't be possible. We cannot take in the amount of information required in order to actually do something with system 2. The only reason that system 1 can take in that much amount of information is because it uses a series of rules and mental shortcuts to understand everything around it, and system 2 doesn't. It's just intensive, it is effortful, and it uses a shit ton of calories. So immediately, we know that the brain's not going to want to use that system. It's going to be like, nope, we're going to do anything that we can to make sure that we are using system 1. Now, the challenge with all of this is that it gets really boring talking about system 1 and system 2, and it also gets a little bit complicated because people can't remember which system is which, myself included, and I talk about it all the time. So I like to refer to system 1 as the Minions, and system 2 as Gru from Despicable Me, because I take everything very seriously. So effectively, the premise, has everybody seen Despicable Me, by the way? Because if you haven't, you should be shamed, and you should go and watch that. We spoke about horror movies this morning, but that's the real horror. So effectively, with the two systems, and when we're taking a look at Despicable Me as a movie, the premise of the movie is you get Gru, this cognitive overlord. He's a super clever dude, right? He's up there, he's making all the stuff happen, and he is effectively super clever. He is a criminal mastermind. He has all these dastardly plans about how he's going to take over the world, but he only got 2 hands. There's only so much he can do. So he either employs or enslaves a little race of yellow people that run around and do all the stuff for him. I don't know what that says about us as a species, that we think that's funny, but effectively, yes. He has all this, these people running around doing these things. Now, the challenge with the Minions is that they're not very bright. And because they're not very bright, it's sort of like a 1 minion, 1 job sort of a deal. One of them uses a hammer, the other one uses a spanner, but it's okay because there's thousands of them, and they're all just running around, and the machine works okay. Until something exciting happens, and it's all thrown into disarray, and they just fuck shit up royally. That's the premise of the movie, right? It's them just fucking shit up. This is your brain. Yay. So effectively, we have all these rules and mental shortcuts in place to understand everything around us, but they go wrong. And when they go wrong, we have cognitive biases. And so those biases that are happening, they're what we like to refer to as our minions. Now, when we create marketing as marketers, we like to create it for system 2. We like to think of ourselves and also our consumers as these very in control people that are making very good logical decisions about absolutely everything. Could not be further from the truth. We spend 15% of our day in system 2. The other 85% of our day, we're in minion mode. Now, the minions are the gatekeepers to attention. If you, as the person going to go buy the thing, go to Google and type in Doc Martens or whatever the case is, you are telling the minions, go off and do this thing. Then find me this information and bring it back and flag it up to me. And the brain is going to outsource absolutely everything it can to system 1. And so system 1, the minions are responsible for finding the right information and bringing it back to you. But they make mistakes. So they filter out all of our hard work. And when we create our content, we like to think that our audience is super logical and super clever. We create exciting titles for things. And we do things that the minions don't recognize because they've been tasked to look for this very specific thing in front of them. So we need to remember when we're creating our marketing, we're creating for minions first and grew later. So our consumers, 85% of the day in minion mode, right? That is what we're using to understand the world around us, and only if it's important enough does it get flagged up. So the minions rule, and they make mistakes. And those mistakes, those cognitive biases, are the things that kill your conversions. Now, who gets that reference? No? No gamers in the room? Ah, yes, exciting. I like my nerds. Very exciting. So effectively, we have over 300 different cognitive biases that are available to us that we use to fuck up our lives all day, every day. About 120 of them are really easy to kind of repeatedly identify in studies, and around 80 of them got categorized into this cognitive bias codex by a dude called Buster Benson. And what he did was he basically took all of those biases and went, these are applicable to marketing, here's how we make decisions. And effectively, if you take a look at the categorization, we can see that in 4 different specific instances, biases are going to happen. When we need to remember something, so that's encoding or recalling information. When we need to, when we have too much information available to us, we panic and we utilize lots of biases. When we don't have enough information available to us, so there's not enough meaning or not enough context around something. And then also critically, when we need to act fast. That's when the brain becomes a real survival machine. So in these 4 instances, biases are going to happen. And they're not going to happen in isolation in the way that we like to talk about them, where we go, we're going to use the anchoring effect on this sales page. That's not how it works, right? They're going to cascade off of one another. Several of them will happen at the same time. And we'll make little mistakes and incremental little mistakes the entire time. So if you look at that, it's guaranteed that in your decision-making process for your products and your services, bias is going to happen. And it's going to ruin your conversion rates, right? It's going to give you a bad time. So I wanted to have a little bit of fun and look at some specific biases that are going to kind of fuck you up just a little bit. So my favorite one is confirmation bias, probably one of my favorite memes about it as well. So definitely a case you go off, you want to find some information, and literally the first thing that matches your own opinion, you're like, fuck yeah, jackpot, right? That is exactly what we all do. Definitely not me in an argument. So effectively, confirmation bias happens because the brain likes to store the same information. Remember, it wants to save processing capacity. Now, we all think this doesn't apply to our products and services, but if you are out there and your competition is saying something different, or your audience believes something else is the case, and you are one of the people who has a service that is something that people need but not necessarily want, then confirmation bias is really going to get in the way. So there's a reason you should be creating products for the things that people actually want and not the things that they need, because confirmation bias means that we're not going to pay attention to that information. We filter it out. We want to encode the stuff that we already have stored in memory. So we want to save space. We don't want to create new neuronal synapses and links. Instead, we just want to store that information. This is really bad for politics. It's really bad for people ignoring doctors' advice. It's been really bad during COVID. It's been really bad in many, many different ways, but it's definitely also going to negatively affect your conversions. So how do you get past confirmation bias? One of the easiest ways to do it is to get people to take part in critical thinking, which is definitely something nobody fucking wants to do, like at all. So you can do things that I know that parents are really good at doing with toddlers, And that is you get them to own their idea first. It's their idea, not your idea, it's their idea. So you can do things like create a buyer's guide where you get people to fill out the information that suits them, and then they can choose a product or a service that is appropriate to the things that they have put down, right? So they're owning the outcome instead of you owning the outcome. So there are ways you can get around confirmation bias, but critical thinking is the way forward. Then we have ambiguity bias. So we hate ambiguous information. And if something is ambiguous, we're going to choose the thing that isn't ambiguous. So from a survival perspective, this makes total sense. If I give you two paths and I'm like, this path down here has a bigger jackpot at the end of it, but there might be tigers, there could be lasers, there could be dinosaurs with lasers. You could die if you go down that path. I don't know. Haven't seen the tiger for a while, might be hungry, but there's a bigger option. Or you can go down this path, totally safe, street lights all the way along the way, you're going to be okay, but the prize is a little bit smaller. People always go for the more secure path unless you play D&D, and then you're going to go for the spicy path, right? But effectively, the brain always chooses something that is a secure outcome. So even if your product or service is better than somebody else's, but you haven't made it clear what the pricing structure is, you haven't made it clear exactly how you're going to fulfill that product or that service, you haven't made it clear what the steps are, or you've asked someone to do something and your call to action isn't clear, ambiguity bias means someone's not going to take action, they're not going to do something. So ambiguity bias is a conversion killer on sales pages. Guys, you have got to have pricing information on your websites. People want to know the information. You might not be able to tell them the price, but tell them why. Tell them exactly, these are all the variables that mean that our pricing is variable and it's slightly different, and we need to give you a bespoke quote. All right, so ambiguity is a total killer, even if you have a better product than everyone else's product in the marketplace. Then we have the anecdotal fallacy, my favorite. My best friend's sister's brother said this, therefore I need to send this kind of email out. So we are obsessed with stories. And if you think about the fact that for tens of thousands of years we have passed information down in storytelling format, it makes sense that we're obsessed with stories. But further than that, we actually have mirror neurons in our brain that fire when we're understanding someone else's emotions. So we have to actually physically feel an emotion to understand that that emotion is happening for someone else. So when we are storytelling, our brain is going through the process of understanding how that story happened to another human being. Right? And that is how we understand context around another person. And when we give people data, we don't give them stories. If you think about the fact that data is a new language for us as humans, numbers is very, very new in the grand scope of our evolution and our communication. We are obsessed with stories. So when you're putting data out there, and you're not linking it back to a personal story, and you're not showing people how that data applies to something further, people can't hold on to that information. So it's really important that you actually utilize anecdotes. Anecdotes is something else that means that people take bad medical advice and so on and so forth. But anecdotes can be really, really powerful. So if you've put testimonials on your sales pages, put a picture of a person next to it. We need to see the people to understand it. If you're explaining to people how onboarding works, walk them through a customer success story that actually shows how the customer implemented this thing, they did the steps, they did the stuff that they don't want to do, and that's why it worked. So link back to stories all of the time, because otherwise those anecdotes are going to mean that someone's going to choose something else because they have an anecdote that might actually not be totally relevant at all. Then we have loss aversion. I bet no one's done this. Spent more money on Amazon because they're getting free shipping, right? Or put something extra in your cart so you don't have to pay, spend an extra 15 quid so you don't have to spend 3 quid. Yeah, definitely not me. So when we took a look at brain scans for people, so this is part of one of the things that I studied at uni, took a look at brain scans for people who were losing something. So something was being taken away from them. In this case, they'd been given a coffee cup, and then the coffee cup was being taken away. It wasn't even a huge thing. The brain scans went nuts. Much higher activation to when we gave someone the coffee cup, right? 3 times more activation to losing the coffee cup than to actually getting the coffee cup. We do not like losing something. Go back again a little bit more evolutionary, it makes sense. You're losing your resources, that decreases your chances of survival, the brain panics and you die, right? So effectively, this is really bad for your consumers, because if they are comparing your options to your competitors' options and they feel like they're losing out on something by signing up with you, you're going to have a bad time because the brain's going to be freaking out. So they're going to go for something else, but they don't feel like they're losing out. So you need to be really aware of the context in which people are shipping or shopping in order to make sure that you're not giving them loss aversion. And then we have the availability heuristic. So earlier, Greg spoke about horror movies. I am also a horror movie freak, but it doesn't matter how many horror movies I watch. Guaranteed afterwards, I'm going to be like, the serial killer's coming for me, for sure. I live in an old house, and everything, I'm like, it's Annabelle. I don't know why I'm so freaked out by Annabelle. She freaks me out. Dolls are creepy. So the availability heuristic is where when something can be recalled really easily in memory, it's more important than anything else. So the likes of Nike and BMW can afford giant awareness campaigns where they just advertise so that you can easily recall them in memory and therefore think that that brand is better. But most small businesses can't do that, right? But that's where content marketing comes in. If you're showing up and you're adding valuable information and you're making sure that you're there when your audience needs you, they can recall you more quickly. They have a positive emotion attached to that recollection. And that means that you're taking advantage of the availability heuristic. Otherwise, your competition is going to, because they're going to recall something, it may as well be you, right? So if you can't be recalled in memory, that means you're not as good as anything else, which is total nonsense, but how the brain works. Okay, I know I said I was going to do 5, but I fancied doing 6 because this one is for you guys, not for your audience. Okay, this is something that we run all the time. So I love this image. The policeman is explaining some directions to somebody, and he's got this really cool idea in his head of exactly how the town and the city is laid out, and he thinks he's explaining it really clearly because he's got all the context. But the person he's explaining to has no fucking clue what's going on, like at all, because he doesn't have that structure. He doesn't have that framework. He doesn't have that context. And we do this all the time to our audience. We are experts at what we do. We know what we're talking about. When we're marketing products, we know them inside out. And we forget that they're at a much lower level than we are, and we need to talk to them in their language. We wrap ourselves up with jargon because we think it sounds clever. But the killer is, jargon uses lots of cognitive capacity. You use high levels of cognitive capacity, the brain starts to freak out, and the minions take over. And then you've lost Gru, right? It's not a good time. So let's make sure that we're talking to our audiences appropriately. Okay, I'm going to get on my little soapbox here. I'm going to call everybody in this room a dickhead. Is everybody a marketer? Everyone's in marketing, right? Okay, well, we're all dickheads. And I'll add myself into that as well, because we are all a collective bag of dicks when it comes to marketing. So when you look at marketing, if you give us a channel, we will fuck that shit up, and then we will tell you that we're upset that it's fucked up. Look at what we did to Facebook, right? Facebook was like, we got this cool thing, but by the way, we can advertise on it. And we were like, fuck yes, let's spam them with ads. And then we gave it back. We had the audacity to give it back to them and be like, it's broken. After we broke it. And anytime you put a large amount of people together, we're like, fuck yeah, we can exploit the shit out of that, right? Like in marketing, we're total assholes to our audience. We're always trying to manipulate people into doing the thing that we want them to do. And if you give us a cognitive bias, we are going to exploit the living shit out of that. Like anytime you go to a conference and you hear someone talking about cognitive biases, they're going to be like, use this to increase your conversion rates. But you'll notice the entire time I've been speaking, I've been telling you how to overcome biases, not how to manipulate people into doing the things that you want them to do, right? So we've got to remember that cognitive biases are mistakes that the brain is making. And in perfect conditions, that means that that person wouldn't make that choice. So if you are relying on utilizing tactics that mean that someone is not making a decision in their right mind, and that is the only way you're going to get them to buy your product and your service, you've got a bigger problem than conversions, right? A far bigger problem than conversions. Most of the tactics that I see companies use in terms of dark patterns and all sorts of other nefarious shit that people like to use, if I went to an ethics committee on a psychology board and said I wanted to do that, they'd be like, not a fuck. It is ethically and morally repugnant to be using cognitive biases to aid your conversion rates because you are manipulating people into doing stuff. At the end of the day, if you get people to make conscious decisions about things and you help them make the right choices, they stick around for longer. They are happier customers. You get higher customer lifetime value. All right? So it is better to be nice to people. Who knew? But I'm going to tell you a bit more about why we suck. So we like hacks, and we like tricks, and we like coercion. We fucking love that shit, right? Look at what I called my book. We love it. We love those little pattern interrupts. We also ignore strategy in favor of quick wins, like all the time. And to throw us a bone in marketing, our KPIs are like really fucked up, right? Like our KPIs are super short term. We should be moving to a much longer lifetime value KPI rather than an immediate conversion, because the short-term conversions don't make sense anyway, and they don't aid the profitability of businesses. But we're also biased around all of our own biases. The bandwagon effect is really bad for marketing. Someone suddenly starts doing something what looks like they're doing really well on TikTok, and we're like, oh my God, should I be on TikTok? No, probably not. You don't need to be dancing in order to get money for the most part, okay? Unless that's your thing, then go for it. And then also we get in-group bias. We get really wrapped up in the fact that it's okay to do something because everyone else in the industry is doing it. And we don't stop and go, is it really okay? And is it really good for our audience that we're doing that? And is it actually profitable in the long term? If you need a financial model in order to be a good human being, it is more profitable to be good to your audience because you don't get buyer's remorse and you get higher customer lifetime value. But I shouldn't have to tell you financially to not be an asshole. But maybe I do. But we also get information bias, so we like to sit around and obsess over information. So information bias is where you go and research more information, even when you know exactly what it is that you need to do, but you're like, I'm going to do that little bit of extra research. I'm going to find out that extra thing that I could do, even though I know I have these 5 KPIs that I need to work on. So at the end of the day, we're controlled by our own minions, and we need to keep them in check as much as we possibly can. We've got to train that brain. So let's talk about how we can get rid of biases. The first thing we can do is we can just focus on making it minion-friendly. So make it really easy and provide context all the time. So wherever you can provide context, give it to people. So one of the things that we can do is when we know that there is going to be too much information available. By the way, guys, this bit here, I'm going to rattle through it. I have put it in a cheat sheet. So if those of you who are writing notes and are like, please, Jesus, stop, you can actually download it, okay? So don't stress too much about it. So when there's too much information, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to filter stuff out. And the minions will just decide what the most meaningful thing is. And it may not be the most meaningful thing. It may be the thing that was in the orange box on the website. That doesn't mean it was important. It just meant that it was slightly different, right? We will also be drawn to things that are funny, that stick out, that are a little bit different, because it's a little bit of contrast. You can't rely on that as a marketing strategy, because then if everyone's trying to be different, everyone ends up the same. Right? That was me as an emo in high school. We also notice things that are primed in memory or repeated often, and we like to confirm our own beliefs because the brain is lazily saving space. So if you know that too much information is going to be an issue for your audience, and if your audience is on the internet, that is going to be the case, then you need to simplify stuff and you need to repeat stuff. Summary boxes on landing pages, summary boxes in any places that you can highlight the important information are amazing for the brain to just repeat stuff in a way that isn't annoying. That copywriting rule of 3. Tell them what you're going to tell them at the start of a piece of content. Tell them the thing, and then tell them what you've just told them. It's really important. It helps the brain encode stuff. Why do you think they get us in school to listen to something, to write it down, and then to recall it again? It's so that the brain can encode things a little bit better. If you know that there's going to be not enough meaning or not enough context around something, people are going to do things like connect the dots, and probably where no dots should be connected. So we will find stories in sparse data, and we will find stories that don't exist, because our brains will just make up some shit to make it happen. There's a fantastic study where they got some squares and some triangles and a little circle, and basically they just moved them around, and people made up the story about how the triangle was bullying the square and the circle came in and saved the day. None of that was fucking happening, okay? It was a bunch of squares and circles moving around, but we put stories on that because we felt sad for the triangle or the square or whatever it was. So we will find stories in sparse data, and we will generalize and we'll fill in characteristics and stereotypes. We will oversimplify numbers and data. Remember, data is a new language to us. It's going to take us a while before we can contextually parse it in the same way that we do with stories. And then we'll project as well. So we'll take past emotions and project it onto something that is totally not going to happen. And so if you know that this is going to happen, provide meaning. I know it sounds so simple, but how many times do you get to the conclusion of a blog post and you're like, okay, bye, and you've just given them a bunch of information and then fucked off, right? Give them a little bit more. Tell them exactly. Be really explicit as to what you want people to take away. Don't leave people to make up their own opinions. The brain will pick some shit up and decide it. So don't let the brain do that. Tell it exactly what you want it to do. Okay, and then if you need to act fast, we'll be super confident in our own abilities. So you ever been on like a stressful call and people will be like, oh, we're coming up to this deadline. Everyone's stressed on the call. Like, can we get it done in that time? And you'll be like, yeah. And you get off the call and you're like, no, what the fuck? So your brain just panicked and just went, we have to survive this very stressful situation. You might die, so of course you can do that. No one's dying over Zoom, hopefully. But effectively, you know, we're going to panic in certain situations and we're going to be really overconfident in what we can actually do. We're also going to favor any of the immediate or relatable things right in front of us. So anything that's tangible, we're really bad at long-term thinking. Like really bad at long-term thinking. So if you can give people a quick win whilst you help them get to the long-term goal, by all means give that to them. We will favor completion. We do not want to restart things. We have big sunk cost issues. So if you need to get people to change providers or to do something where they have to let something go, just make sure that you're giving them good enough reason to do so, because you get a big hurdle to overcome there. We also do something very contradictory. We want to be autonomous and make all of our own rules and be in control of everything, but we also don't want to disrupt the status quo. So if you need somebody to do something quickly, make sure that they feel like they're in control, and also tell them that they're not going to disrupt things too much. And avoid ambiguity at all costs. So summaries are amazing for this, and highlighting the stuff that you actually want people to do. So credit card companies do this really well. They have a fact sheet in the credit card agreement that tells you everything that you need about your credit agreement. No one's reading the rest of the stuff. They're reading that thing in that moment of high stress. Okie dokie. And finally, when we should remember something, we're only going to keep what's useful. We're not going to keep the other stuff, but what's useful, who fucking knows? It's minions, right? Could be a banana. It's probably not at all the thing that is useful. I know with my ADHD that I remember people's hair color, but not their name, which is not helpful when people change their hair color a lot. So we're only going to keep that specific stuff, so obviously that might not actually be useful. We'll pick out a few facts about stuff and discard the rest. We're not going to pay attention to everything. We absolutely will not. We're going to save space, so we'll smoosh things down. We'll transfer feelings and emotions to things that shouldn't be transferred to, and we're going to conflate things. So we'll smoosh things, two memories together to create a new memory that didn't exist before. So very not good. So if you've got this, keep it really simple for your audience at any time when you're asking them to recall or encode new information, and also give them the big picture. Show them how all the stuff connects together. Okay, guys, so in rounding up, when it comes to cognitive bias, we need to be aware that it's there. It is not something to be manipulated and utilized. It is something that we need to be very conscious of, that is going to be ruining the decision-making process. If you can, at all times, provide context and be really explicit with your information, and lean into that consciousness and people's desire to make the right choices, not the coercion element. And KIMF, so keep it minion-friendly at all times. All right, guys, and there's that link.
Brilliant. So everybody's back now. That's the first time I saw that presentation, because I was actually in the other room hosting the other session. That was really, really interesting for me, because having studied biology, and I was really interested in the sort of the system 1 and the system 2 stuff. So is there anything from that, because you've obviously seen yourself again, which I know is always a bit weird, is there any real take-home messages or examples of where people get it really right or really wrong that you'd like to share? Because you mentioned you do that in the book. So I'm just waiting to see if there's any questions. But while we're waiting for some questions, is there examples of where people get stuff do really well or do really badly?
There is I used to use this as an example of a company that does it really badly, but they've actually changed in the last couple of years, which is so frustrating, but also fantastic. So Salomon, the running company, well, they're not running, they're like outdoor clothing and stuff. They do this really well now. So it used to be the case that if you wanted to buy any Salomon clothing and that kind of stuff, you kind of had to have a suggestion by somebody else or see one of their ads. They would never kind of give you enough context as to why their clothing was so expensive or all of this kind of stuff. And then they changed recently and they made their kind of pages on their website problem specific. So like if you're into trail running, there's now a page that's all about trail running, all the types of equipment that you might need for trail running, and all the various different things that mean that their stuff is the best thing out there. So there's case studies, there's reviews, there's all that kind of stuff. So Salomon has started doing this really, really well. So they show you how to get the most out of your shoes, how to get the lifetime value out of your shoes, all that kind of stuff. So they're doing a fantastic job at that. And they always used to be really bad. So it's kind of like a nice success story, which is great.
You must have come and watched one of your seminars, I guess.
Maybe because we literally have a whole series of slides shaming them. So maybe somebody sent it to the marketing department and was like, you guys need to level up your game. So Salomon does that really well. For sure. And then anytime you're going to see a company that really clearly explains their products and their services and empowers the customer to make decisions and allows sales to take a backseat and answer the questions that the customer has and explains the onboarding process, then that's the way to go. So that's the kind of stuff I just noticed. So yes, I've got a couple of questions about the book. I'm going to get you guys a link to my own book page, my own article.
I was just about to ask about this.
because of the fact that the book has just sold out. So they're obviously out of stock. So I'm gonna have to get Amazon some more stock. But I have stock in my house. So what I'll do is I will get you guys the link for that. I need to find it.
It's really funny as you were talking because there's some things that Annika does really, really well. So we've been we've always had prices on our website. And I know that we've had new members of staff. So why the hell have you done that? You either put, because we're not the cheapest agency, because obviously we invest a huge amount in our staff and we do really, really good quality work. So, and we have a sort of a minimum amount of time that's required to do a good job. So we obviously put some people off, but, some of the other people have said, well, you could be charging more for some of the work. And I sort of said, well, it's not about that. It's sort of giving an idea of our pricing point. And actually it's really rare. You find very few agencies actually put their price on. So I think that's really interesting.
Go
on, Katie.
Yeah, I found it really interesting when Kenda said, if you're not actually going to put the price on, explain why and give the context and, just kind of, just provide that explanation. And I've worked in so many different sectors where they've got, things quite wrong in the past and kind of gone in with a fresh perspective, kind of been able to help turn things around. So, yeah. Oh, we've got a question come in from Chris. It says, it just occurs to me that dealing with autistics as I do, maybe due to their routines, they are stuck in system 2 rather than system 1. I are getting ready in the morning. Thoughts?
Yes. So depending on the type of sort of grouping that people are sitting in, so people with ADHD, for instance, don't have the capability. So I have ADHD as well, and our brain actually doesn't control itself. So we're like flying between system 2 and system 1 all the time. And it's why we crash sometimes. We get super fatigued because we use too much processing power. And yes, people who have other difficulties and learning disorders can get stuck in processes. That's 100% the case. But there's also a lot of other things going on at the same time. So, for instance, there's a lot of overlap between the way that autistic brains process information and ADHD brains process information. Even though they've got slightly different problems, there's quite a big overlap that means that they process in similar ways. So yes, one of the best ways to get people to do things is to make sure that they've got a comfortable routine with doing something, and then piggyback off of habits. So if you're going to get people to do something, piggyback off of a habit that they currently have already. So for instance, for any of my other ADHD people out there, if you want to get your squats in and make sure that you're doing a little bit of exercise every day, do them while you're brushing your teeth, because you won't remember to create a new habit, but you can pin a habit to an existing habit. And it's exactly the same for autistic people as well. So that's habit piggybacking, where you merge two habits together to create a new habit.
We've got some more questions coming in. I wanted to come on to some of the other things you were talking about complexity and simplicity, but let's answer the questions in the chat first, and we'll come back to that, because that when we redid our website, that was a big part of trying to cater for people with different levels of sophistication with their digital marketing knowledge. Okay, so let's go. Katie, the first question was from Simon. How would you recommend dealing with the pricing piece on your site without putting in a figure that could mislead people and therefore not be too ambiguous so it's confusing? I think you said prices from, didn't you?
Yes, prices from is part of the way to go. And this is also where buyer's guides are so fantastic. So for instance, explaining the variability of the pricing. So a good example of this is Marcus Sheridan used to have a pool company called, I think he still has it, called River Pools and Spas. And he had a lot of information that explained what causes variability in how much a pool costs and why you need a bespoke quote. And he had a couple, a surgeon and his wife, who basically read over 150 of his articles and built a spreadsheet that had all the various different things that they needed, and then just had one little box that was for the price. And then they came to them and said, we just need, these are all the things, we know that these are the things that affect the pricing, so can you give us a quote? So it is a way to empower people by explaining what the variability is. These are the things that are going to affect pricing. Can't give you an exact number because we need to do a bespoke quote for you. And it gives people a reason for it. It's exactly the same thing as people are happier to wait for 3 times as long if you tell them why they're waiting. So you have to give them a reason for that variability and explain stuff. And you can say prices from, it starts at, this is the baseline price, but these are the things that are going to affect it. And this is how you can go about it. But as long as you explain that variability and explain why there is variability, people are very comfortable with then reaching out for it, and they feel empowered because they've collected all the information that they need to give you so that you can give them a really good quote.
Okay, let's come back to the one about serving millions versus do it, because as you know, Annika is probably my fault, but Annika is very data driven and very detailed, and we do very extensive audits. So one of the things we do in that is we provide a lot of information, and we also try and give a lot away as we go through that journey. So I relate, my confirmation bias picked up on that immediately, because that's what we do. But the interesting thing was Tom, who joined us last year, and he's come from very much a branding point of view and worked with a lot of big corporates, said our website was had too much information. But so what we ended up doing was we had 2 layers. So we had the sort of the top of the so we explained all the channels in quite a lot of detail, but the top level was quite simplistic about what we're going to achieve for the clients. But then actually, if you really were interested in remarketing strategies, you can go in and find that out. And the reason we went that route was, first of all, because so many other agencies have those pages. And so there was an element of, well, if everybody else is doing it, you need to do it as well, which I thought was interesting that you were talking about that. And I can't remember which bias that was, but also making it simpler for the people that didn't really want the details. So I'm guessing without realizing it, we were trying to do those two things. So could you just explain which are the two biases we've been trying to address by doing that?
Okay, so you've obviously got a couple of different things there. So you're trying to avoid ambiguity bias,
yes.
which is really important. So giving that context and explaining what's going on. But you've also got bandwagon effect there. So, but the bandwagon effect is where you see everybody else doing it and you go, oh my God, I need to be doing that too. Like, this is something I definitely need to be focusing on right now. And we're definitely super guilty of that in marketing. So yeah, it's a hard one to avoid. And the challenge with taking a look at the bandwagon stuff is we don't know whether or not it's working. And it's unless you can see the data behind something, and someone's not always going to tell you the truth either, especially if you're a competitive agency. So unless you can see the data behind something, we don't actually know if the bandwagon is working for everybody else. It might just be that everybody's on there because everybody else is on there.
I really get that. I mean, one of the I sort of wanted to go down the solutions route. You know, if I may. If I've got a bit like you, you know, I want to think of it from the customer's perspective. They want to increase their sales of an e-commerce website, or their retailer, and actually, what they're really interested in is probably a cross-channel project where all they want to do is improve the sales, lifetime value, conversion rates, get more traffic, better retention rates. So the solution, you would think, was a page on e-commerce marketing. But interestingly, if you look at the way people search and actually the pages they go to, they still go to PPC first or SEO first. So actually trying to do something different, if you just did the different thing, your site wouldn't work. So I think so my approach is belt and braces, try and do both. You know, because if you're trying to be the black sheep, you probably have to be a black sheep in a herd of white sheep. So I don't know what you think about that.
You have to. The challenge with trying to stick out and trying to be different is you get into an absurdity battle. So things become more and more absurd in order to be different and to stick out, because the second you're different and sticking out and it's working, other people will start doing the same thing. Yes. So the challenge with that is that it's a constant battle to stick out, and you end up being some kind of crazy homunculus of business because you're trying to stick out all the time. So instead, it is definitely coming at it from a problems perspective. And you mentioned a couple of things that are really important. One is white noise, right? So white noise is the second. I don't know if anybody has white noise machines or listens to white noise to sleep at night. It's the only way I sleep is I have some rain noises playing to help me sleep. I notice the second that switches off. The second something happens and it stops, I'm like, oh my God, what's just happened? But you don't notice the noise while it's happening. And that is the same for all of us. When we are missing things on our sites that people are seeing everywhere else, it's suspicious. It is a pattern change, right? Yes. And unless you're giving people good reason for not having that, you should really make sure that you're covering all the bases, and then you should have your differentiators. So you do need to have a little bit of the white noise. It's why it's important to keep on top of what the competition is doing. So you need to, and that's also the loss aversion is going to come in there, and all that kind of stuff. People need to feel confident they're making the right choices, and they need to feel empowered in the choicing. So one of the things that we can do instead is, if we're doing a solutions-focused approach, is to show people how you are solving their specific problem very, very clearly. And when you're providing the content and the context as to how you're solving the problem, and you've got all of the bases covered, what you're doing is you're setting a new baseline. You are anchoring new information that people will then get compared against. And you're also empowering them. And when you empower people, you build a good positive relationship with them. So it's really important to make sure that you are empowering people in the decision-making process, giving them the information that they feel that they need, and they are comfortable to reach out to you, and they've got everything together, that it's their idea. And that you can help them in the best way possible, and that they've done a little bit of ground research. It makes people feel comfortable, and it overcomes some of those biases and sets a new baseline. And even if they then go and have a look at the competition, because you set a new baseline, you are what the competition is now being compared against, which is exactly what we want.
And you see that a lot. I mean, I know this would there's be lots of people from different industries, but you see this a lot in our industry, because once an agency wins an award, like you said the same thing, we're both award-winning agencies, and that's it. If you're not award-winning agency, you're sort of not up to the mark.
Yeah.
But I thought case studies is an interesting example of that as well, having good case studies, because we often get sofa companies that come to us, 10 years after we did the sofa.com work, because that's relevant to them. So that's interesting. The other thing I think that's been really influential, and something that, I know we've got a lot of regulars that come to our webinars, is the webinar for getting the story across and getting the trust, because some of the concepts that we present in a webinar, you couldn't do you couldn't write what we do on a page to describe. For example, today, this was an example. If you were trying to explain this on your website, it's actually a lot more difficult. Yeah. So sort of those speaking slots, webinars, other methods of communicating the story of what you do and your expertise is something that I think we would recommend all of the audience to do. And I guess you get a lot of business that way, I think you said earlier.
100%. And I think a lot of people have sort of reservations about, oh no, people don't pay attention to stuff. People don't have time to read things or to attend a webinar. Absolutely, categorically not true. So people have a lot of time for the things that they are interested in. And so provided that you are providing, that actually giving stuff that is interesting to people and that is solving their problem, they will spend time to understand, to make a better choice. So as long as you're giving them those opportunities, you're doing great by giving them that additional context and that additional information.
Yeah, I mean, there was quite a lot of pressure within the agency to stop doing the webinars every week, but I sort of, this was one of the things where I pulled rank and said, no, we do have the breaks every now and again. But I mean, you can see by the people, there's 4 or 5 names there that I think probably attended 20 or more webinars. So that's really cool. So a lot of people are creating social posts, and a lot of people are creating social ads. They don't always do a lot of advertising in other ways. Is there a way of looking at what you've done with a different set of eyes so that it might be more effective? Is there a trick, or is there somebody you should show your ads to who maybe would give you a better way of understanding whether a minion brain would respond in a positive way? Is there a golden little nugget to go away with as we get to the end of the session?
I think one of the most important things that you can do is to run it through people who aren't in the industry. So we get kind of blinded by our own information. That's the curse of knowledge, right? So sometimes having your own echo chamber is not a good thing. So you can definitely run it through a couple of other people if you can. One of the ways that I like to validate ads and stuff, though, to make sure that it's on the same level, is actually with search volume. So that's my nugget that I use to validate a lot of stuff for terminology, to make sure that the right terminology is being utilized. So for instance, if you are creating a specific ad for, let's say, marketing automation, and you're creating this amazing ad where you're talking about demand generation, blah, 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 all this amazing stuff. That's probably not going to work for a UK-based audience because no one's searching for demand generation. Yeah. But if you then go and do, finally got that link. Here you go. This is a link that is directly to my site, not Amazon. So you guys can actually buy the book. It's annoying because Amazon, we've just checked, Amazon does actually have 100 books. So I don't know why they're saying sold out. They're weird.
I think Carol's.
Validate stuff with search volume is probably the best advice that I've got, because that shows you the terminology that people are using when they're actively looking for something. Exactly. So it helps keep you at the same level as everything that your audience is speaking to. So I use everything I use search volume to validate, of course, blog content, but also lead magnet ideas, product names, ads that are going out, all that kind of stuff. Search volume to validate the terminology that is being utilized. The other little thing that you can do if you're wanting to go on a slightly different route and you're wanting to find how people are talking about something, so not necessarily a specific term, is to, it's called, I can't remember what it's called. It's called a review mining. So go onto Amazon, find a book or something, and you can do this on Goodreads and stuff as well, or any review site, and find a book or something that is along the similar lines and look how people are talking about that book. Read the positive comments, read the negative comments. Is your audience using very specific sticky terms that come up all the time when they're talking about that subject matter? It is a fantastic way to see how people are talking about things and some of the terminology that people use once they've read a book, once they've purchased a product or a service. Review mining is amazing, and you can find books on any subject across everything. But also, if you're an e-commerce company, of course, you're going to be able to mine reviews from other e-commerce companies as well. And that gives you really nice terminology to utilize within stuff. So my advice is always find out how people are talking about things to make sure that it's minion friendly, rather than you trying to come up with a good idea.
Excellent. I'm just conscious we've gone past 10. That went so quickly. I can't believe it. Katie, have you got any reviews and things to publish? Because I know we lose a lot of people at...
just to, obviously, as part of Leicester Digital Live, we're fundraising for the UNICEF Ukrainian appeal. So I've just sent a link to that. Also, if you're able to give us a review on Reviews.io or Google, that would be amazing. We've all put such a lot of effort into producing the Leicester Digital Live programme, and it'd be gratefully received. It really helps, to be honest, as Anne was saying earlier. I think that's everything. That a lot of people are asking for the link still, though, Kenda. So I don't know if you could put it in the chat.
I think I'll put it in the chat again. I think it's in there now. This is directly, funnily enough, and directly to Infusionsoft as well.
It has come, up for me now. Sorry.
Nessa, thank you. That's such a nice thing to say.
Excellent. I feel like I could talk to you all day.
Katie, what's next week? Is there is ATG doing their stuff on cybersecurity? Or is that
Steve can't actually do next week, so I'm just trying to fix the date. I think it's more likely to be the 16th, but I've just got to get hold of him. I think he's on holiday at the moment. But we will be launching our, internal webinars again, externally facing. So that'll be great.
Excellent. Thanks a lot. Speak to you soon. Thanks so much, Kenda, for joining us today and answering lots of questions. And we'll send the video out in a couple of hours. So speak to you all soon. All right then.
All right. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.